All right, I think we'll get started. I saw that the majority of those who have registered are here, so that's great to see. Seeing some familiar names and some new names, so also great to see. If you don't know who I am Danny Robertson Boersma. I'm the Programs and Peer Review Manager, and I've been Program Manager for the Establishment Grant for a couple of years now. I was away last year, but I'm back and excited. I love this grant. It's a lot of fun and it's always great working with early career researchers. Just a couple things. If you have any questions at all, please put those in the Q&A. If I don't see it right away, I will make sure, especially at the end of the presentation, to go through those questions. So if something pops up in your mind, just throw it in there and I'll either answer in real time or at the end. So just want to give you that heads up, and I guess we'll get started. So welcome to the, and we are being recorded, not that that really matters for you guys, but still it's important just so you know, and we will, I believe, post this and share afterward. Okay, now I'll get started. So welcome to the 2023-24 Establishment Grant Information Webinar. Like I said, I'm Danny, and I'm going to make sure that I can flip through slides. This is just an agenda, brief overview about SHRF, who we are, what we do, just in case you don't know us. And then we'll go into the program overview, so everything you need to know about the establishment grant itself. This includes important dates. We'll go through the eligibility step that we have into the application process. We'll also discuss the review process and then just go over some tips, and that's when that question and answer period, the formal component, will happen. So pretty straightforward. So first off, who are we? We're SHRF. We are the Saskatchewan Health Research Foundation. Our goal is that we work to fund, support, and promote the impact of health research that matters to Saskatchewan. Pretty straightforward. We have been doing this for a number of years now. The Establishment Grant is one of our long-standing programs, but we also have quite a few others. So health and research is vital to the improved health of Saskatchewan citizens through a high-performing health ecosystem with a robust culture of research and innovation. SHRF is vital to enabling the best health research that supports Saskatchewan solutions to Saskatchewan health challenges by upholding a rigorous peer review process, by measuring and sharing the impact of our funded research, and collaborating with partners who can help maximize the impact of this work. So we have three strategic goals. One is to strengthen the research capacity and competitiveness within the province. Our second one is to increase investment in research and innovation. And three is to align research with stakeholder needs. So that fits in pretty well with that previous slide. This is what we work to do, whether it be with our funding opportunities, the partners that we work with, and then working towards sharing the impacts that we have from our health research funding. So our programs fall into like 4 different buckets. We have the capacity, so that is the establishment grant. That's where we're working on expanding the capabilities for impactful health research by building capacity. Our second one is solutions. So that is the innovation and impact grants within our solutions program. What happens there is we identify we target creative solutions to complex problems. It's bringing solutions into action through Saskatchewan-based health research. So every year you're going to see specific focus areas within that solutions program, and sometimes we bring on different partners and they have different focus areas as well. So it's a bit of a mix match of different areas where you can apply for either innovation or impact. Then we have our connections. Some of you may have known this as the research connections. We are we will be transitioning to the connections program, and under that we will have the Align grants. Those were released this year. That's something that you would grab at the start of your research when you're trying to collaborate, when you're trying to get an idea going. Sometimes it's nice to just have that $10,000 just to get started so that you can apply to larger grants. And then we have Mobilize, and that is the original research connections, new name, and for the most part, everything should be pretty similar when you see that in 2023-24, but that's where we're trying to do knowledge mobilization activities and implement your research that you have completed, or if it's in the midst of your research and you want to share that information to knowledge users. And then we also have our partnerships. So this is various programs. This is where we work with other partners, either on our grants, so within one of those first 3 buckets, or we will go and work with partners on their applications. So they'll be running the competitions, but they'll be SHRF maybe focus areas, and then there's obviously SHRF dollars also attached to that. So that's kind of our 4 areas. So establishment grant, as I said, is in that capacity 1. And I'm going to discuss the scope, purpose, and the important dates. So establishment grant, the scope of health research, you can apply and be anywhere within, maybe you are basic biomedical to more of the population health and it's applied. Anywhere within that, this is a very open program because the focus is on the individual more so than the idea, like with our solutions where it's more of an idea focused grant. So this is for everybody and anyone as long as you fulfill the eligibility requirements. So the purpose of the establishment grant is to assist early career researchers in Saskatchewan in establishing an independent program of health research in the province and achieving the research productivity that's necessary for obtaining major funding from national and other external agencies. So this is your starting point grant. This is, like I said, it's a long-standing grant. It's always been very successful, and our focus is to help you in building capacity and building up your research in the province. So something to make note of, just going to make sure I have questions up here, is our amount and duration. Some of you may know that previously the amount was $120,000. We've now been able to up that to $150,000. So that's pretty exciting. Something also, we do have a partner on this grant. So the Saskatchewan Centre for Patient-Oriented Research, otherwise known as SHRF, will be working with us on this grant, and that means that there will be a minimum of 2 grants available that has to focus on patient-oriented research. There is information within the package specifically to what SHRF is looking for if you do decide to apply for this partnership, and that's on top of what is also required for SHRF. And then the other thing is the duration of the funding can be up to a maximum of 3 years. If you are able to do your work in 2 years, you're allowed to apply for that. You can still apply for the 150 within 2 years. You can do the 150 with 3, anything like that, as long as the timelines make sense and your budget is reasonable. So a couple of important dates. This launched on December 2nd. That's usually when we launch, is early December. Get it out there, get you thinking about it right before Christmas and the holidays. And then the next important date is the eligibility check cutoff. So in order for you to open a full application, you must complete eligibility, and that's due January 19th at 4:30 p.m. CST. So I would mark that in my calendar right now. I would make sure to have a reminder a week before, especially if you have any kind of institutional requirements. I think that's more at the full application, but it's important to check with your institution to see if they need to see anything before the eligibility deadline, and usually they want that about a week before. So another important thing to put in your calendar. You are allowed to submit anytime beforehand. If you want to get that off of your desk before the end of the year, this is a great time, and then I will review those and try to get back to you as quickly as possible. But the last possible date is the 19th, and then I have to have all eligibility revisions back to you by the 26th. So if I have any kind of questions, I'll send that back, and we may have to do a little bit of back and forth, and then a final decision will be made by the 26th, and that should say 2023, not 2022. There's no movement in time there. So, and then afterward, once your eligibility has been approved, you then have time to work on your application, and that deadline is March 16th, 2023 at 4:30 p.m. Again, make sure to check in with your institution, see if there's any internal deadlines when you're needing to get your dean letter or the equivalent, when you need to get signatures. It's just important to have that all lined up. so that you're not having to do any kind of last minute scrambles or possibly miss out on the deadline. For this establishment grant, you can do CV updates, and that is due by April 27th. So if there's an important publication that comes through between our application deadline and before the review meeting, you can get that sent in. This is just for the PI. This isn't for co-applicants or supporters or anything. So that's pretty straightforward. I hope you heard all of that. We'll move into some helpful links. So something that's really important is there's the current funding opportunities. So along with your establishment, you could check out what else we have as you're working to maybe show and build your application for this grant. You could say that you might apply to the solutions program, or you maybe the Align grant is something you're looking into as you're building those relationships and everything, especially when you're new to the province. That would be a great opportunity to look into. Another important one is the SHRF Matters newsletter. Chelsea does a great job of compiling everything programs related into that newsletter and making sure that you guys are aware of deadlines, upcoming opportunities, tips and tricks, anything like that. So I suggest if you're on your computer right now to sign up, or at least try to do that by end of day, and then that keeps you informed as to what's coming up SHRF-wise. Another one is our resources page. That's where you're going to find the funding guide and something like the establishment guide. Those are your probably two most important guides, and then the RMS manual is your third most important, because the RMS is going to be your best friend in the next 3 to 4 months as you're working on this. And so we want to make sure that you are fully supported with all of that information. And then finally, we also have a YouTube channel. Yeah. Finally, there's the RMS how-to videos. And so that's on our SHRF YouTube. Those videos will help you go step by step on how to use the RMS. Hopefully they're very helpful. Thanks, Maria. And yeah, it's a good resource to have. So if you can maybe hop onto your YouTube and just follow that page. We will be doing some updates when it comes to grant management videos too. So yeah, another important resource. All right, eligibility. So this is the important stuff. I'm hoping I don't cut out. I will not move. So who can apply, team member roles, etc. So the principal applicant, we have a definition of what the principal applicant is in our funding guide. So you are self-directed and autonomous regarding your research activities. Therefore, you're not a trainee or a contracted employee where someone else may have decision making authority over your time. You have to be able to hold peer-reviewed funds as the principal investigator and to be able to publish research results. You're affiliated with a Saskatchewan institution, which has a memorandum of understanding, an MOU with SHRF, and I have that coming up in the next slide, exactly who those MOUs are. You're obliged to conform to institutional regulations concerning the conduct of research, supervision of trainees, and the employment conditions of staff. And you have to reside and work in Saskatchewan during the funding period of the grant. As we are a provincial funding body, this is a pretty important one. As you can see, these are the institutions that have an MOU with SHRF. So we've got the U of R, Saskatchewan Polytechnic, USask, St. Thomas More, the Saskatchewan Health Authority, and Parkland College. If you are not with one of these institutions, then this grant you wouldn't be eligible for, but we can always discuss in case something comes up. So requirements that are specific to establishment. This is an early career grant, so you need to be within the first 5 years of your initial faculty appointment as of July 1st in the application year. So for us, this would be July 2023, and then you count back 5 years from that. We all know that some of our jobs aren't always as clean as just counting back 5 years, and we do allow for if there's been any interruptions, we can discuss those. We do have specific definitions, but sometimes if you are working on your PhD and completing that, we'll add that time, so that would push you back further as an example. So yeah, if you have any questions about your eligibility, my suggestion is just send me an email and we can either resolve it quickly through that, or we can set up a Teams or a phone call. Also, you need to be at the assistant professor equivalent. This is important as it kind of relates back to what we were saying about the definition of a PI and having that time and being able to make decisions for yourself. And the other thing is you can't have been previously awarded an establishment grant. This is a one and done grant. So once you do have it, you can't apply again. But that's okay because we have other grants for you. So as we know, most research doesn't just happen with one individual. Even though this grant is focused on you and your research, we know that there's usually team members helping you out in certain areas. So there's no minimum team requirements for this grant, but it can strengthen the application. So individuals can be added in one of 3 roles. So you have 3 roles. You can be an applicant, personnel, or a supporter. So the applicant is usually like your co-applicants, that role. Please note that co-principal applicant is not an eligible role for this grant. You can only be a PI or a co-app. And so within co-app, we do have 3 types. We have our researcher, and all these definitions are in the funding guide. We have our knowledge users, and we have our persons with lived or living experience. And we'll get into then the requirements for that. So those ones may have quite a bit of work on your grant. They may have very specific roles. We then have our personnel. So they carry out the aspect of the project. So that's where you can put your trainees and research staff, and they can be compensated from the grant. Applicants cannot. There are some specific rules when it comes to persons with lived or living experience or knowledge users, and we can always discuss that. But with personnel, they can be compensated from the grant. It never hurts if you already know of someone that you would like to hire onto this grant, whether they be a trainee or research staff. I would list them on the grant. It just helps to get a better understanding when reviewers see it, that they know that you have someone that has the expertise to do the specific work that will be required of them. But it's okay if you don't have that too. Obviously, you're just starting out. And then there's the supporters. So those are individuals or organizations who provide a limited and defined role in the project, and they have an interest in the proposed outcomes. So maybe you are doing research when it comes to heart health, and you have support from Heart and Stroke. That's just a very general example, but they would be in that role because they may just have a very limited or specific role in comparison to your personnel and applicants. So within the co-applicants, as I said, there are 3 descriptors, and your co-applicant does have to choose one. So I know it will come up that sometimes you may have a researcher who's also a knowledge user. For that grant, they need to identify who they are in that role. They're either researcher or knowledge user. They can't be compensated from the funds. The exception, as I said, was knowledge user time release. So we have specific policy regarding that. Or person with lived experience honoraria. So just a brief overview, a researcher is an individual with formal training who holds a position which supports them to pursue research and whose expertise supports the proposed research project. This is where you may want to have a mentor on your grant, someone that may help you with either a specific component of your methods when it comes to recruitment, things like that. That's where you want that researcher. Then there's the knowledge user. That's an individual interested in the application of the knowledge generated from the proposed research. They can play an active role in mobilizing knowledge to ensure research results have an impact. So that has a very broad definition depending on what kind of work you are doing. Your knowledge user, if you were a bench scientist, your knowledge user could be a clinician, because maybe next steps are that you are going to get it from the bench into clinical. So that's a great role for them. And then there's the lived and living experience individual, and that's someone who contributes to the proposed research, and they're related to their personal experience with a health issue, or experience as an informal caregiver. If you are doing Alzheimer's research, and you may be working with different caregivers, having some individuals who are willing to be on the grant always strengthens it, because they're able to then put in their voice and help you as you work towards your research findings. So I'm going to move into the eligibility check. Like I said, all of that information about team membership can be found on within the funding guide, and it'll be on this presentation. So eligibility check process, the purpose is to confirm that the principal applicant eligibility and submission is to the appropriate funding opportunity Within this one, we make sure that you're within that 5 years. It gives us just a bit of an idea of who's applying in what area, because then that actually feeds into our review process. Like I said, it facilitates the creation of the review committee. If I know that we may have 20 applications coming in for biomedical, as an example, then I know exactly how many reviewers I need to find, and I can start looking for within which area of research. And it also helps to identify interest in partner funding opportunities. So this is where, if you are interested in the Skipper partnership, you're going to identify it here, and then that way we can inform Skipper of how many individuals are interested in funding. So the process, it's all submitted through the SHRF RMS. I highly suggest, if you haven't been on there yet and you haven't created a profile, please go on, do that, get familiar with the system. I guess it's not as recent, but it's gone through an update. We've tried to make it easier, but we're always willing to hear where you may be having some issues with your experience, so let us know. But here is the principal applicant position title and start date. You'll have the project overview and fit with program. That's what's going to be in your eligibility. Co-applicants can be added to the application at this stage, but no contribution forms are completed until full application. And because there's no team requirements, honestly, what we're looking at is just the principal applicant, so you don't have to add them at this time. So if you felt that you had to, this won't hold you up, so you could get your eligibility in early and then add them later. It's reviewed internally by the SHRF program manager, so that's myself, and it's a rolling intake and approval with a cutoff of January 26th. And like I said earlier, I may request more information prior to a final decision. So getting into the application, so this is following eligibility. We're going to talk letters of support, allowable expenses, and the contribution form. So application documents, also all this information is in the application package, along with, if you go into the instruction section, that is actually what your application will look like when it comes to what information is going to be requested of you. So even if you're still in eligibility stage, you can get an idea of what you will need to complete at application. So there's the research proposal. You have 10 pages to tell us what you're doing, how you'll do it, and who you'll do it with. Then there's the sex and gender considerations. You'll have a 1-page timeline. You've got, with this grant, a dean or department letter of support. So this lets us know, as it says, it's a supporting letter. Do you have any release time? Does it let you know what your startup funds are? Space, everything like that, that will help you as you work on this grant. Then there's references. There's no page limits there, and we just ask that you use an appropriate referencing citation that works with your area of research. So that's something to keep in mind if you're doing biomedical. You'll want to work with that. Sex and gender considerations, that's a good question. So what should be included in sex and gender considerations? So there's 2 questions. It's broken down into, does your research look at sex? So, and the definition of that, you want to explain, if it does, how you'll be considering it, and if it doesn't, why. Something that comes up in peer review is when this isn't answered adequately, they then create more questions. So if you aren't using sex, but maybe that's something that does come up quite a bit in your area of research, give a really clear explanation as to why. And the same thing goes for gender. We know that there are differences when we talk about sex and gender. So if you're not considering for gender, you do need to explain why. And if you are, explain how you're considering it, whether it's your sample size, you're looking at population. I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head of what I've seen. I don't know if that really answered your question, but it's just important to be very clear as to why, and especially why not, when you're asking. So then there's the budget references. I talked about budget and justification. So the budget Excel parser and justification upload. We now have, you have to download an Excel parser, and then you fill that in. So it's in Excel, and then you'll re-upload that up. So it'll have all of the budget lines that you need If you need any definitions within that budget, please ask us. I think we are working on that document right now just to make things clear. And then there'll also be the justification. So make it clear as to why you're asking for what you're asking. We're just wanting to make sure that with your budget and your justification that you are making sure there's no questions asked by the peer reviewers when it comes to if you were asking for $4,000 in travel, but you make it very vague, they're gonna be like, well, it only costs this, or only costs that. But you're gonna say like, I'm traveling to a northern community, it's gonna take this long, this is why we have to do it. That's a pretty simple example, but it's just an important one. So the less that the peer reviewers have to fill in blanks, the better for you. And then there's the contribution form. So those are for applicants, personnel, and supporters. And what those are is it's going to explain their role, what they're doing, and you'll be able to upload information related to the expertise and experience. So as an applicant, say you are in the researcher role, you're going to be submitting a researcher CV, which I will explain in a second, versus if you are a knowledge user, you're going to be uploading a testimonial. And it just goes, we have those different information pages in order to explain to the peer review who you are, the expertise you have, and what you'll be doing on the grant. It's really important that this get completed as soon as possible. We are always working on it, and I know that there can sometimes be some issues, whether it's with individuals who may not have access to the internet or just have trouble completing some parts in our RMS. Start this as early as you can once you have your application open. That's my biggest tip on that one. There's the impact consideration. So what will your research do? What is that going to look like when you complete your research? How is it going to make Saskatchewan healthier? That kind of thing. And then research office signature, as earlier explained, just make sure that you get that as early as you can. Be aware of institutional deadlines. We need to make sure that the institution knows you're applying. So the Dean Department Head letters of support, it's jointly signed by Department Head and Dean or their delegates. And it's describing, as I said, research environment, including those supports, confirmation of sufficient protected research time to complete the proposed activities in the given time frame. So you'll want to make sure that that letter, and when you put that side by side with the timeline, it's all going to make sense. And not one thing is saying less or more than the other. The nature and the extent of your hours and days of non-research activities. Every department, every college is different, and our reviewers understand and know that. But we want to make sure within this letter of support, it's clear that you may have a teaching load of 2 classes per term for 3 years, or maybe you have no teaching for the first 2 years, or if you have clinical hours, stuff like that. And it'll also have the start date confirmation effective by October 1st. So say if you haven't gotten your position yet, but your position is starting July 1st of 2023, then you'll want to have that in your letter and make sure that the dean and department head or equivalent have confirmed that. And then information regarding term positions and the process to permanent position. If anyone is in a term position right now, we can have that discussion if you kind of just need to understand what that means. But we just want a bit of information from your dean or department head that even though you're in a term, because this is a capacity building grant, we want to see what that next step is to make sure that you're become a permanent position in the province at your institution. So allowable expenses. Expenses are necessary to carry out proposed activities and are not provided through other means. So equipment purchases, they are unallowable, but they have to be justified. So we need to consider the availability of the equipment and how it benefits the principal applicant's long-term research program in Saskatchewan. This is the biggest one. So if you have any questions about your equipment that you may be requesting, you can send that my way and we can discuss it. It's really just looking at the availability. If you don't have access to a very specific machine and you need that in order to complete your research, that would probably be an eligible expense compared to something else. Like I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I know laptops come up quite often, so we would just have to discuss that on a case by case. Cost of academic focus knowledge sharing limit. So it's 10% of the total budget. So that's something to keep in mind. The knowledge user time release allowance to allow participation in research activities. We do allow for that. We would just need a couple of things to go with it, such as a support letter from the knowledge user's direct supervisor. And then any costs associated with building external relationships outside of the institution that'll benefit your proposed program of research. If it's appropriate and clearly justified in the research proposal, it'll most likely be allowable. Again, if you have any questions, budgets are very obviously personal to the grant. And so it's best just to send a question if you have it and get that answer and approval from me. Or if we can't approve it, then we can look at solutions otherwise. So other considerations with your budget, the costs explicitly associated with preparing future grant applications are not an allowable expense. So don't put that in there, we'll have to cut it out. In-kind and other sources of funding required to complete the proposed research should be included in the budget and justification. So you'll see that in that Excel parser on the second sheet, there is an other contributions table. So if you know that there is equipment that costs $10,000 that you'll be able to use in kind from another lab, putting that in there is good for reviewers to see, and then they also, because then they'll know that you have the equipment and access to it and you didn't have to purchase it yourself. And then industry supports are required to provide cash or in-kind contributions in an amount equal or greater than 50% of any reimbursement received from the grant for goods and services. As we start working with industry, it's important. That helps you with some of your moving your research forward, but we just need to make sure that we're accountable and that there is a bit of give and take within that. So again, refer to SHRF funding guide for policies which apply to all SHRF programs when it comes to budget considerations. And if you have any questions, just send them to me. So the contribution form, just a bit more information. So this is for all project roles. They are added to an application. They have to create an RMS account to complete and submit a contribution form. This can't be done outside of the system. So applicants, just so you know, you're either doing, it's required on your descriptor. You're either going to be doing a researcher CV, a knowledge user CV, or a testimonial. Personnel, you don't need to do a CV. You just need the contribution form. And supporters only need a letter of support. So CV requirements, there are 2 SHRF CV templates. So researchers, this is important. We have decided to discontinue the use of the CCV. So please don't sign in there. You won't be able to find the template for establishment. We've hidden that away. And we've decided to move forward and use our own template. Instructions are on that template, so it'll give you an idea of what needs to be completed. I strongly suggest to look at that sooner than later as well, just to get an idea so you can start building that. The SHRF template will give applicants the freedom to decide how to highlight their expertise and skills in this research area while maintaining general structure for peer review adjudication. So you'll see that there's going to be headers on there, and then you can fill it in as you see fit. In order to show who you are and how you can do the research. And then there's the knowledge user CV template, which we've had for quite a few years now. Same idea, there's instructions in there, and then we have headers that the knowledge user fills out. So impact, that's an important thing for sure. That is, like I said, one of our strategic goals. So the application is going to ask you to discuss the potential for impact using the CAS framework. So that's the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences. You can look that up, check it out. I believe we also have it linked on our website. If that makes it easier for you, it's probably under resources. So within that, you're going to respond to building capacity. So maybe with your personnel, how are you building up your area of research? There's the advancing knowledge. So looking at that quality, activity, and outreach. There's informing decision making. So if you're doing any kind of policy research, and you may be impacting that. Health impacts, so the status, determinants of health and the health system change. And then there's those broad economic and social impacts. So it could be the commercialization of your work, looking at the health benefits, social benefits, anything like that. So something that's pretty important, you fill that out within the RMS and you get to give, I believe, a paragraph for each. Just quickly going to go over our Skipper partnership. Some of you may know who Skipper is. This may be new to others. So projects that focus on patient-identified priorities to improve patient outcomes and engage patients as partners throughout the process. The knowledge generated from the Skipper partnered projects are intended to improve healthcare systems and practices, leading to great quality, accountability, and accessibility to care. Skipper supports are available throughout the application process, so you can contact them directly. We have Savannah, who is the contact for this grant. She's listed near the front of the establishment package, and she's also within the instructions as well. She's a great resource, so if you do plan on doing this, it may be good to touch base with her now as you're working on your application. Also with Skipper, because it's patient-oriented research focus, the applications are going to be evaluated both by SHRF's peer review and Skipper's patient review. And they'll be using the patient-oriented research level of engagement tool, otherwise known as the PORLET. And they're also going to be guided by the Indigenous Research Levels of Engagement tool, the IRLET. I hope I said that right, as applicable. So patient reviewers will be receiving the lay abstract, the testimonials, and there's one other thing that you have to do for the Skipper grants, which is a PORLET or IRLET description. If you have any questions about that, we can talk about that through email or a call. It's just one extra thing that you do have to fill in as that goes to the patient review panel, so that they can then review your application following their guidelines. So there's a couple of requirements additional to our establishment grant. This one does have a team requirement. There needs to be 2 patient partner team members who have personal lived experiences with the health issue that you're researching. They are added as co-applicants and then as persons with lived or living experience, and they would be the ones that would be doing testimonials that would be uploaded to the contribution form. You'll then need a letter of support outlining partnership with Indigenous community. This is applicable. This is if it's applicable. It's encouraged, but it's not mandatory. It's just good to see that relationship building going on with Indigenous communities. And then you need to submit the description of how the project addresses the PORLET criteria and, if applicable, the IRLET criteria. So as said, this is outside the RMS. There is a link to the survey in the application package, but if you're having issues with that, you can send me an email and I can email that to you directly. And that survey needs to be completed for the full application, not for eligibility, just a FYI. So review process. All applications to SHRF research funding competitions are adjudicated according to principles of peer review. We have a peer review guidelines. They're up on our website. If you're interested in knowing exactly how our process works, that's all listed in there. For this one, your application needs to score a minimum of 3.5 on our 5-point scale in all 3 criteria to be considered for funding. These are multidisciplinary committees from across Canada. We have it broken into a socio-health committee and then a biomedical committee, but then they're looking at everything within those pillars. There'll be 2 lead reviews on your committee, so or on your application. So there's a primary and a secondary. They're the ones that are going to go with a fine-tooth comb. And then everyone else, unless there is a conflict, will have access to your application to review, so all other reviewers. And then we're also, for this grant, we get external reviewers just because of the array of applications. So we aim for 2. Sometimes we can only get 1, sometimes we get 3. But the goal is that you'll have 2 external reviews, your 2 lead reviews, and then the whole committee. And then we have, we're still probably doing a live virtual discussion at this time. We'll have to discuss with our committee if they'd like to come in person. That's what it used to be. But we've also done virtual long before virtual became a thing. So we have a process for that to make sure that applications still get the fair review that they deserve. And then funding is allocated top down in each funding envelope. So based on demand, we'll have a certain amount to socio-health, a certain amount to biomedical. We start with our top rated grant and we go as far as we can to fund whole applications. So the peer review criteria, full details are in your application package. It's important to look this over. I know I keep saying this is important, that's important, but this one will help you in guiding for what the reviewers will be looking for. So your track record is 45%. That's your scientific productivity, originality, and impact. It's looking at building a reputation for excellence in the field and demonstrating exceptional promise for future health research, both provincially and nationally. The review committee understands that 5 years is a big timeline. So what we're doing is when they see each application, they're looking at who you are, where you're at, and if you're moving in an upward trajectory. That's what's important. So either you're in your first year of applying, or it's near your 4th or 5th year. The goal is they want to see you working upward. The next will be your program of research. So that's 40%, and that's the integration of one or more projects within the proposed program of research, and the feasibility within the proposed timeline. Something that I always hear our peer review committee talk about, especially within this grant, is sometimes they'll see a lot of projects in there. Make sure that they're all feasible. Like you could talk about you're going to do phase 1 and 2, and you'll be able to do that within your 3-year timeline. But you have this, like then phase 3 will come up, but don't try to cram it in if you can't. They are very concerned about feasibility and making sure you can get it all done within that timeline. So sometimes it might be beneficial for you to explain phase 3, but say, I won't be doing it at this time due to timelines. But that's totally up to you. And then finally, that 15% left over is the impact. And that's that potential of impacts for the proposed program of research. That's where those CAS impact categories become important. So you'll want to explain those and let our reviewers know exactly, not exactly, because we all know that impact can change, but what you're wanting to do and how you're going to do it, and the impacts that your research can have if all goes well. Okay, so tips for writing your application. We're just near the end. Thanks for sticking through, you guys. So make sure you read the application package and the SHRF funding guide. Highlight important parts that relate to you. When you're writing your application, make your case. Explain how you're going to do it, why you're going to do it, and how you're the best person for it. You're going to detail the how. The methods is super important. I'm sure you hear that all the time, but if you can tell them how you're going to do it, that's you're already on the right track, because then they don't have to guess and, like I said, fill in those gaps. This is also important in that summary. When you work on your scientific and lay summary, make sure to put in a sentence or two about the methodology. This is actually something that we use when doing level of expertise for our reviewers. So you want to let them know what your methods are, so then they know if they can review that fully or not. Make sure to address potential bumps in the road. Again, reviewers love to take something, look at it, and see, well, what if this happens? So you want to beat them to it. Identify that this could be a potential issue, and this is how you may handle it. Make it easy to read. Like I said, we have socio, health, and biomedical, but it's still important, where possible, not to get too deep into the jargon, though that is important, but making sure that someone that is out of kinesiology will understand it, or if they're out of public policy. Just keeping that in mind when you're writing. Formatting, pretty straightforward. We have rules for that. Check your math. I know reviewers sometimes can get a little annoyed when they see very large discrepancies in your budget. I also know that applicants probably get a little cross-eyed because you've looked at that budget for a very long time. So have someone else do that math for you to make sure that it's good to go. Field test your application. Have someone read it that is not in your area of research but would have an understanding. It's always good to make sure, does this make sense? Is my methodology clear? It'll really help you in being successful. Oh, I hope that question doesn't say you can't hear me. Yes, I can. Then go back to the application package, which you've written everything. Make sure you have everything. You've got all of your contribution forms. Get those in early. That's a February deadline for yourself, is having all the contribution forms in, so you're not chasing after that and after review researcher signatures. So that's important. Research office. Sorry, we got rid of anyone putting in signatures. I don't want to cause confusion there. So those are just some tips. That's it. I will go back to the IRLIT and the PORLIT. But beforehand, I'm your main point of contact. We do take Christmas off, but I'll be checking my emails intermittently. If you decide that you want to do some work over the holidays, I'll do my best to respond to you within a couple of days. Tanya is the RMS person here. She probably won't respond to you over Christmas. So if you need to figure anything out over the RMS, I would do that within the next week and a half. If you have questions regarding Skipper, please contact Savannah. I'll be able to help as best as I can, but she knows a lot more about Skipper. And yeah, just follow us. We're on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and our YouTube. So the IRLIT, PORLIT, was there a specific question that you had regarding that, Maria? Or just because there's different criteria? I don't have it listed on here, but just to make sure, it is linked in the application guide. And there are, I believe, 5 sections. Oh, please don't say that. Yeah, so what it is it's going to have 5 areas, and it's just focusing on you asking questions or answering questions regarding your research and how it relates to patient-oriented. I don't have it right in front of me, but it is up on our website, and if you go through that, and then we can have a discussion, or we can connect with Savannah, because she is more of an expert than I am when it comes to the PORLIT. All right. The SHRF CV template can be found by going into the SHRF establishment site. We haven't put it up on our website fully just because we have one competition that's still using CCV, and that deadline is the same day as the eligibility deadline for this. But if you're having an issue finding it, just email me and I can send it to you. It's also linked in the application guide. We tried to make sure to link everything you need in there. So if you just open it up as a PDF on your computer, it should take you directly there. No, so apart from the 2 patient-oriented grants, all other grants that are open. So we don't have any other partners at this time. Sometimes we may have partners come in afterward if we see something that, say, is very specific and of interest to Lung Saskatchewan, who we've worked with for quite a few years. We will then bring that up to them and see if they would like to partner with us, but that would usually be done after the peer review process. But at this time, only Skipper is on this grant, and it's only for 2 grants. All right. Is there any other questions? I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you again for your patience. All right, well, I'll stay on for a little bit if everyone has questions. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing your guys' eligibilities by the 19th at the latest, but I'd love to read them before the 23rd too. I also know that's a crazy deadline. So have a good day. Thanks again, and talk to you all later.